I was thinking the other day, a journalist asked me why why people are responding so positively to what I'm saying, the young men, for example, and I thought, why? Yeah, that's a good question. He says, well, I'm actually on their side. I'm really happy that they're not wasting their lives. I'm really sad to see that people are disenchanted and nihilistic and depressed and anxious and aimless and perverse and vengeful and all of those things. It's terrible. And then to see people question whether that's necessary and then to start to rise out of it. It's like, it's so fun. Like last night I was after my talk, it's overwhelming. I don't usually think about these things, but I was after my talk last night, and so all these people line up, and they have their 15 seconds with me, and they're kind of tentative. They're excited and attentive when they come up to talk to me, and then they have 15 seconds of time to tell me something. I'm really listening to them, and they're hesitant about whether or not to share the good news about their life, and I think it's often because when people share good news about their life, people don't necessarily respond positively. They don't get encouragement. And people need so little encouragement. It's just unbelievable. And so they'll tell me something good, and I think, oh, that's so good. Somebody says, oh, I'm getting along way better with my father. I haven't seen him for 10 years, and now we get along. It's like, God, great. Yeah. And then the power of that, you can't overstate the power of that for individuals to get their life together. The individual is an unbelievably powerful force, and every single person who gets their act together a little bit has the capacity to spread that around them. It's a chain reaction, and so it's a lovely thing to see. And
that's fantastic.
I don't want my young children indoctrinated with dangerous ideas, and as time marches on, I trust public education less and less. I know that you have strong thoughts on the danger of the devouring Oedipal mother who harms her child by protecting them, and that's certainly not what I aspire to. I wonder if, in spite of your idea that kids need to become tough and learn to slay dragons, if you have anything good to say about the idea of homeschooling.
Well, I don't have anything bad to say about it. I do know that the Quebec government has recently taken moves to make it much more difficult for people to homeschool their children. And it's not like 5 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have presumed that the vast majority of people who were homeschooling their children were to be viewed with skepticism initially. I'm not so sure about that anymore. For example, I was sent a poster today. Someone sent me this link that they found in a local junior high school, and one of the media pieces that were recommended on this poster was a movie called Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Now, I thought that was a terrible movie, even though I'm perfectly capable of enjoying bizarre movies. But so it's a bizarre movie, that's for sure, but I also thought it was a terrible, bitter movie. Terrible and bitter. Those are separate. A movie can be bitter and be quite great, but it was a terrible movie and it was a bitter movie. But I can tell you one bloody thing about that movie. It's not required viewing for 12-year-old kids. That's for sure. So I think you have increasing reason to be skeptical of the public education system. I also looked at the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario's guidelines for education from kindergarten to grade 8, and what that is in essence, and I think I will do a video about it in the relatively near future, is a blueprint for transforming children into social justice warriors. It basically says that. It's like you don't have to be a conspiracy theory to read that. We have social justice tribunals in Ontario. And so the idea is, well, if you're going to get your children, if you're going to get people to, what would you say, favor equity properly, well, then you better start teaching them while they're young. It's like, maybe not. So now, you ask that question properly, because you say, well, the terrible education system, the wonderful mother homeschooling, right? That's the danger. It's like, no, because it might not be the wonderful mother homeschooling. It might be the pathological mother using the pathology of the education system as an excuse to get her talons into her children, right? Because that's certainly equally possible, or perhaps even more possible, because at least in the public education system, there's some necessity for consensus. So that's something that you have to be very aware of and work to prevent, right? And so I would say if you're going to do that, probably best not to do it on your own. And it's like you need a board of advisors or something like that, and so maybe it can't just be you, and you have to figure out, well, what is the aim? And how are you going to manage that? And what makes you think you can do it? Even if it's being done badly publicly, what makes you think you could do it better? I mean, my general advice is, and people have asked me this, in fact, I had a conversation with the guy who was tiling my backyard this morning about something his son had said to him that he was taught at school recently, which really made the tiler, who had come from a rather authoritarian country, step back on his heels and think, I'm not so sure I should be sending my kid to public school anymore, and maybe I shouldn't be living in Toronto even. But my general advice is keep an eye on your kids and discuss with them what they're learning, and help equip them with the tools to not only to articulate their own viewpoint in response to what they're being taught. Now, the problem is you might not have the time nor the ability to do that. That's no simple thing. And increasingly, if you're unwilling to have your children participate in what is increasingly indoctrination and not education, thanks to, in no small part, to the Ontario Institute of the Studies on Education, which is an institution that I particularly despise, because I think that almost all it does now is produce indoctrinators of children. It's not an easy problem to solve. So more power to you wanting to put your children in a situation where they're not being indoctrinated, but the alternative is very, very complicated and difficult. So, yeah.
I'm telling him or her, to observe is the most important thing in life. Not tell the observation how to observe, but to learn the art of observing without any distortion, without any motive, without any purpose, just to observe. In that there is tremendous beauty, because then there is no distortion. You see things clearly as they are. But if you make an abstraction of it into an idea, and then through that idea observe, then it's a distortion. Right? So, we are merely, freely, without any distorting factor entering into our observation, observing consciousness. So consciousness begins to reveal its own totality. There is nothing hidden. It is because the content, which is our hurt, our greed, our envy, our happiness, our beliefs, our ideologies, all that makes up consciousness. The past traditions, the present scientific or factual traditions, and so on, so on, so on. All that is our consciousness. To observe it without any movement of thought. Because thought has put all the content of our consciousness, thought has built it. When thought comes and says, this is right, this is wrong, this should be that, you are still within the field of consciousness, you're not going beyond it. So one has to understand very clearly the place of thought. Thought has its own place in the field of knowledge, technology and all the rest of it. But thought has no place whatsoever in the psychological structure of man. When it does, then confusion begins, then contradiction, then all the struggles, the images about you and another, all the rest of it follows. So, the art, as we said, art, the meaning of art means to put everything in its right place. Not the painter, not the sculptor or the poet, but in our daily life, to put everything in its right place. That's art. So, can you observe? Can you observe your consciousness? And does it reveal its content? Not bit by bit, but the totality of its movement. Then only is it possible to go beyond it. Not through analysis, which we talked about, because analysis implies the analyzer and the analyzed, the division, the problem of time in division. And when you analyze, each analysis must be totally complete. If there is not complete analysis, then the imperfection of that analysis is carried over to the next analysis. So the imperfection grows more and more and more. You understand? Like practicing on the piano and practicing the wrong note all the time. Right? So that is our inquiry. And in inquiry, can you observe without any movement of the eye? Because the eye has effect on the brain. You can observe it for yourself. When you keep your eyeballs completely still, observation becomes very clear. Because the brain is quietened. You can experiment with this. This is not a trick for something further. It's like going to a guru and learning few tricks. There is a lovely story, I must tell you about it. Young man goes to a guru, a teacher, and says, please tell me what truth is. I've searched everywhere, nobody seems to be able to tell me, and I've come to you. Please tell me what truth is. And the guru says, stay with me. Be with me. And so the pupil, disciple, stays with him for about 15 years, watching him, all the rest of it. At the end of 15 years, he says, good Lord, I have learned nothing. And so goes to the guru and says, I'm so sorry. You have taught me nothing. I haven't found truth. I'm going to leave you and go to that guru, the other one. And so after 5 years, he comes back, he says, at last I've learned. And the guru says, what have you learned? You see that river? I can walk across it. Without a boat, without anything, I can tread on the water. And the guru says, you can do that for tuppence if you take that little boat. Right? I think you should bear that story in mind when you approach any gurus. So, can you observe without any movement of thought interfering with your observation? It is only possible when the observer realizes that which he is observing are one. The observer is the observed. Anger is not different from me. I am angry. I am jealousy. So there is no division between the observer and the observed. That is the basic reality one must capture. And to observe without the observer, just to observe, then you will see the whole of consciousness, the whole of it begins to reveal itself without your making an effort. Which means in that total observation, there is the emptying or going beyond all the things that thought has put together, which is our consciousness. The reality which thought has made, is not truth. It's the reality of thought.